All right, just further elaboration on Picasso, and some of this could tie in also with reading for today. Um, I did notice a few comments in the discussion forum. Why artists are creative. Sometimes elements of an artist's life are embellished in some way. And Yep, so with Michelangelo, yep, Ken.
It's interesting, some of the,
I will admit, how does Picasso really fit in with the theme of religion and visual art? Or how does this reading, help to explain any connections between religion and Picasso? With Andy Warhol, same thing with Jane Dillenberger. That's one way, is to say, here's an artist who we never thought of as being a religious person or a religious artist at all. But actually, you can look at some of the work he created from a religious perspective. And if you look for that particular aspect of an artist's life, in the case of Andy Warhol, yeah, he had pretty strong religious roots. And he actually continued with fairly devout religious practice that he kept mainly hidden over the course of his art career. So that's kind of one approach. I think that's kind of sometimes the kind of approach that we're kind of looking for. Now with Picasso, it also seems like Jane Dillenberger is in the same kind of situation of, hey, Picasso is an artist that no one ever really thought of as being a religious person or producer of particularly religious art. And so let's explore that. And so Jane Dillenberger's book does elaborate some, but to me, it's not as strong as religious art of Andy Warhol. In part, when we dig underneath the surface of Picasso, we don't find the same level of personal religious devotion that we see with Andy Warhol. We don't see quite as much as what Andy Warhol did with the Last Supper series. And if we also take into consideration, was the Last Supper series, in a way, his last major series? And as his final major series of work, does that have any particular significance? With Andy Warhol, it seems like there is a time after he's shot where he's particularly contemplating the theme of death. So we can kind of see that in Picasso as well, with the death of his friend Casahemus. But yeah, generally speaking, the relationship of Picasso to religion is much more ambiguous. If anything, we could include Picasso in a course on religion and visual arts, simply because Picasso is one of the most important artists of the 20th century. I mean, I would say that he is the most important artist of the 20th century, and probably the most important artist of several centuries, going back to possibly Michelangelo being the one artist that gives Picasso the greatest amount of competition as far as level of greatness. But here, there's definitely something religious here, even if how that is religious is not very blatantly clear. But Paul Borowski's book is a brief history of the artist from God to Picasso. I guess in some ways we might think of Picasso definitely not as traditionally religious, but there are religious themes. And if Picasso's work in some ways challenges religion, that is still one kind of way that artists relate to religion. Okay. I also posted a reading the unknown masterpiece. I actually admit I was not able to read through the whole thing recently. I have read through it before, but the unknown masterpiece, if we go to that, you will actually see what it is the story of basically an art professor coming into an artist's studio, and the artist presents the teacher with a work of art that they have created. And the art professor basically slams it and basically says, your painting depicts, what we see, but this art professor continues and elaborates and tells this student, your painting has no life. And that's really the thing that it seems that this art professor is saying, there's no life in your painting. And that seems to be, for the art professor, that's what you're supposed to do, is give paintings life. In my mind, I'm thinking this looks like we're potentially going down the road of like a Prometheus. Prometheus, who created sculptures and was sad that his sculptures did not have life, and stealing fire from the gods was a way of giving his sculptures life. So anyway, here I'll just kind of go into, that caught my interest. One thing caught my interest that Picasso had created illustrations for the for that work, for that it's a short story, The Unknown Masterpiece. And so I went to find the book that Picasso illustrated, and here are the illustrations from that book. His illustrations do not tell the story of what is happening in the story. It's just, so that's interesting, is they are just various renderings, a girl's head. When it says a lithograph, 5 states from 1 stone, is basically a lithograph is literally a stone slab that you apply materials on and then print from that material. So you couldn't really do that with paper. At some point, you can't really continue to work on the same piece of paper, because the paper will, if you're erasing, your paper is just going to get destroyed. You could paint over the same piece of canvas, but and people do that as well, but you're going to have like an accumulation of canvas. Whereas with a lithograph, you can kind of erase parts and redo parts on that stone slab. And, if you wanted to, you could kind of erase the whole thing and start fresh, because it's a stone slab that's a couple inches thick. So, it's, you can reuse the surface. And so he's basically making different variations of a girl's head from the same stone. Some of this is just basically tying in with Borowski's chapter on metamorphosis in Picasso, that theme. And I guess I would also say that what this is represents Picasso and the idea of metamorphosis, the idea of change, the idea of transformation of topics from one topic to another, or transformation into different stages. And to me, this is actually a series that I had seen before. I didn't know that this was included as the illustrations to The Unknown Masterpiece, but to me, this seems like one of the a very good example of how of abstraction, how Picasso works from realism to abstraction. And in some ways, there is an idea that Picasso, some of Picasso's greatest works were First Communion, Science and Charity, some of the Blue Period, things that are more traditionally painted. And the more abstract work is not as good, or looks like a child could paint that. Here, I think, is a very interesting depiction of abstraction. If you look at this, is it a bull? Yeah, a bull. And this is one of the more realistic depictions, you could say. But 6 states from one stone, he also goes into more of abstract as well. And I think he's basically posing the question, how to make art. Myself, I would just say, as an artist, like for me, I'd be like, this would be much more easier for me to draw than this. Or like, if someone told me to draw a bull, this would be much more easy for me. My drawing, if I were to, it would just be easier to draw something like this than this. Like, this is actually just difficult to draw. It's difficult. How do you come up with that? In my mind, whenever I look at Picasso and the abstract art, I'm always like, how do you come up with that? I don't know. Like, as an artist, how do you put these lines there? Like, that comes from your imagination. When you look at the bull, you don't see that. And somehow Picasso comes up with these different variations. I think you can see, some parts left from one to another. But yeah, just different variations. And in my mind, it's just fascinating. How do you come up with these variations? That is difficult to do. More easy to just say, oh yeah, I can draw, a bull, find a picture of a bull and draw that. So the idea of metamorphosis, transformation. Okay, here, I just thought this is again somewhat just similar to what Picasso will often do. Is a lot of his works, traditionally paint on canvas, drawings on paper, but he really liked to work with whatever materials he could find, and just even common materials. So this one, I think, is this the one? Some of these have the impression, I'm not sure if I'm correct here, that he drew this on the side. Now it does say a lithograph. I don't know how that plays out, but like these, the waviness here, I don't know if he did this, but it kind of looks like if you have a piece of cardboard and you're drawing on the cardboard and it kind of makes those darker spots because of the creases in the cardboard. And that's just kind of a real Picasso thing to do is, draw on some piece of cardboard and actually take advantage of the fact that the cardboard gives you that little extra texture, is what it looks like is happening. I don't know if that's right. I don't know how he would make that on a lithograph. Another thing that he did a lot of is explore the relationship between the artist and the model. So here are variations. Again, he's basically reworking the same stone, leaving some things as they are, adding some other things. Is showing a progression into more and more abstract. Here are just a few other images of works by Picasso that are referred to in Borowski's writing. This is The Woman in the Garden, which is apparently a variation of Apollo and Daphne. So how you come from this as your original subject to this, quite a bit different, but that's Picasso. Very common that he does that kind of thing. Or within that same kind of topic of transformation, this is also mentioned in the reading. One of his girlfriends, Francois Gillot, that he painted as a flower as well. He was also very interested in just kind of suggesting in a portrait that someone could be something else that such as a flower or a plant. And then finally, another very interesting variation, and just shows again, I think, just Picasso was someone who was, as much as we can criticize Picasso and say his work is overrated or whatever we want to say, he's a guy who came up with just ideas that are right there. Sometimes one of the criticisms of Picasso is like, a child could do that, or I could do that. And for Picasso, yep, it's true. Anyone can take a bike seat and a bike handle. Those are just everyday common things. Put them together and create a bull's head. But fact of the matter is, not that many people actually do that. Or so Picasso, just something as simple as that, putting those things together is and actually in his case, the bike seat, made out of some kind of probably plastic covering, to actually turn this into a bronze sculpture as well. Okay, so those are some of the themes when it comes to metamorphosis and Picasso and creativity and so forth. Okay, so with that, we'll call it a day, and thank you all and see you next time.